Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series, show in which we look at the players that have been linked to Arsenal with some help of an expert and looking at them, of course, in a statistical and analytical way. I'm very happy to be joined today by the Editor-in-Chief of Get Italian Football News, Cos Pandy. How you doing, mate? You good, you well?
Yeah, I'm good. Been a while since I came here, but feels good to be back.
Last time we spoke, we were talking about Kulusevski, I think was the last time we had a chat. It's
Yeah,
fair to say he's gone on to do quite well since moving to Spurs. Kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Painfully, frustratingly. Thankfully, it's not resorted into any kind of success for them. And there's even discussion amongst the Arsenal fan base how Arsenal might be able to hijack a potential permanent deal when that loan comes to an end, because the
is it?
clauses are very strange in that loan. So we'll see. Maybe that's one for another time.
I never
But
thought of that.
yeah, it's interesting because they have to qualify for the Champions League for it to be a mandatory
Yeah,
option. So it's going to be intriguing what happens at the end of that loan deal. He's an Arsenal fan as well. Important to remember that one.
yeah,
But
that's
yes,
right.
we're here. We're here today to talk about Jakub Kiwior, who I don't know much about, to be honest, at all before today. And as most people know that watch the show and listen to the show, we do an 8 a.m. news show every single day. And the ironic thing at the moment is that news seems to drop about 9 o'clock, which is only about half an hour after we finish our 8 a.m. show. So I'll do a show, and then half an hour later, it's useless. So that's what happened with Trossard yesterday. It's what happened with Kiwior today. But he's a player that I'm very interested to know more about. I've spent the afternoon looking at a fair few clips and going through Scout and learning a bit more about him. But you're here, Cos, because you know plenty more than I do about the player. So to give people a bit of an insight into what we're going to do, as we always do, we're going to run through a lot of different things about Kiwior, the player, style of play, where he plays in his best position. Of course, we think of a left centre back, but he's more versatile than that. Look at how he compares statistically to some of the existing Arsenal players and, of course, players we've been linked to, how he might fit in at the club, and ultimately our verdict and whether he's worth the money. So let's kick off, of course, with kind of his rise as a player. He's only been in Serie A for a season and a half, I believe, at Spezia. How has he transitioned into the league?
I think he's done seamlessly well. I mean, there was a period when he came in when he was injured, but before we talk about Kiwior, we need to know about the context that Spezia find themselves in, because Spezia are the sort of side which were financially probably the poorest side in the division when they got promoted to Serie A. They had Vincenzo Italiano come in, who's now at Fiorentina, of course, doing really well. He somehow knitted together a system which was really pleasing on the eye and used a lot of younger players. And somehow that team overperformed. And against everyone's expectations, they stayed in the division. And then when Kiwior joined, Thiago Motta was in charge. And I think there was a period when he joined when, pretty early on, that Spezia didn't really have too many midfielders, which they have now, which is why he's playing more often at centre back. They had Simone Bastoni, who I absolutely love for his hairstyle and his footballing skills.
Yeah.
Giulio Maggiore, I think he was there last season, went to Salernitana now. I mean, those were pretty much the two really reliable centre midfielders which they had, which meant that, and none of them are defensive midfielders. But after a point, Thiago Motta thought, why not? Let's just play Kiwior there because he's physically really sound, and he's just as technical as a manager like Thiago Motta would want, because we know the sort of player Thiago Motta was. I mean, that physical entity who was decent on the ball, but I think Kiwior is someone who's much more technical professional than Thiago Motta was. So he filled in that defensive midfield role, also played as a number 8, although um, on paper it was a number 8, but he was more of a deep lying number 8 who did more of the defensive tasks. That was pretty much the story of his first season. He didn't play at centre back too much. His transition to centre back has taken place this season, which under Luca Gotti, who had managed under Maurizio Sarri. He was the assistant to Maurizio Sarri at Chelsea. And he was at Udinese, who played a very pragmatic brand of football. And Kiwior's played in that as well. I mean, we'll probably come to that later, but Kiwior has done quite well in the time that he's been there, and that's probably why a lot of, a couple of German clubs, Dortmund, RB Leipzig, at least three Italian clubs, and Arsenal and West Ham, the two English clubs that have been looking, I should say were looking at him now.
Yeah.
Josko Guardiol, who's been linked to Real Madrid. Leipzig saw Kiwior as one of the replacements if Guardiol ever left for Real, which he probably will next summer. So I think he had a pretty promising time, and Juventus had sent scouts regularly to watch him play as well. So again, really positive signs.
Yeah, really positive. It has been quite a significant rise. The first time I heard of him was that link to Borussia Dortmund. That was the first time he kind of came up on my radar. But playing for Spezia, not the most glamorous end of Serie A, and so he manages to stay off the radar, I think, for most people. And I think it's these types of deals that show you kind of how deep Arsenal's analytics and scouting goes amongst Europe when you see these types of deals happen. And everyone's looking at the Trossard deal going, it's an obvious player. And actually, I think Arsenal, in the same time that they've had Arteta as manager, they've signed now 8 players from other Premier League clubs, which is the same amount of players that they signed in the last 11 years from the Premier League before Arteta turned up. But what's important to remember is that he is still good at identifying these players. And I mean, if you look at Takahiro Tomiyasu, who came in from Bologna, and you look at kind of the talent identification they've got going on in Serie A, it is certainly improving, because it was a league that Arsenal hadn't really tapped into all that much in the last 15 or so years, but you're starting to see some talents, especially in the early 20 stage, come through. So in terms of his style of play, as you've mentioned there, we'll talk about his position in a little bit. But stylistically, how is he as both a DM, I suppose, because he can play there, but also as mainly now a centre-back?
I think we can't really compare Jakub Kiwior to any single Arsenal player out there, although a lot of people online have said that he's close to Gabriel. But I think purely looking at his physical specimen, he's someone who's exceptional aerially. And I think he's really good at tackling and interceptions. He's really quick off the ground. But I do think that there's one weakness in his game, which is, I think that probably comes naturally to, the taller centre backs. It's turning when he's in him or her is in a 1v1 situation. Kiwior is someone who can sometimes be shaky in that department, but otherwise he's really quick across the floor, and which can be a surprise considering how tall he is, how well built he is, and aerially he's really good. But I think technically is where a lot of questions have been raised. But I think the context for that is really important, because Spezia, for me, are a pretty poorly coached team, essentially, because they've been so for the last season or so as well. I mean, Thiago Motta is someone who's known to play, he's never been that pragmatic manager. That sort of name tag has never been attached to his name. He's more of that manager who wants to take control, wants his team to take control of the ball, make those final third movements, play into those, have those two wide players play in the half spaces. He's much more, on the ball, much more progressive. Whereas Luca Gotti is more structured. But when I see Spezia play, their midfield organization when trying to receive the ball is probably Serie B level or something like that.
Really?
So I think Kiwior is someone who's probably suffered from that, because I think he's really good technically. He's someone who, the reason why, people have been looking at FBref and stuff, the metrics and all of that. I use that as well, but again, as I said, the context for that is that he can't play a progressive pass if Spezia are sort of poorly organized in midfield. No one's trying to receive the ball. I think that's the context that he's operating in. And I think another sort of issue which holds him back is the fact that he's played in the middle of the back three a lot of times, which I don't think is his real position. I think he should be playing as a left-sided centre-back, especially when Spezia's left-sided centre-back is not better on the ball than Kiwior is. So I think that's something which also holds him back. But I think he's someone who definitely sort of deserves to play in more of a progressive system, which I think Arteta Arsenal will provide. I saw him play for Poland as well. Poland were probably one of the worst teams in the World Cup for me, not just in terms of the chances they created, the way they played, but I think even in terms of the way they were trying to build from the back. You looked at teams like even Qatar, who got knocked out, who was the first team to get knocked out of the World Cup. They had a very good um, shape while building up from the back. I never saw Poland do that. And I think they went till the round of 16 of the World Cup, if I'm not wrong. They lost to France there.
Yes,
and there were instances against France when Poland did have a lot of possession, because we know how France play. A lot of times they like to sit deep and then use their wide players to break. And Kiwior was pretty good in the ball in that game specifically. So I think the context that he's currently in sort of holds his strengths back as well. But if you look at him closely, you can see that he's quite technically proficient.
Yeah, I think what's important is when you look at those and you talk about the context of teams, is that's where you start talking about potential, and that's where the big teams like Arsenal and the teams with the greatest amount of analytics and scouting and stuff, they look for players that maybe are a little bit hamstrung by where they are, and if they're performing well in these types of situations and in these types of environments, it gives them kind of that encouragement to go, well, if that's what he's doing in this scenario, when he makes that switch to a club like Arsenal, and you take the training wheels off, to use a really bad analogy. I mean, I think it gives you that potential to see him grow significantly. Let's talk about the position. Over the last 3 seasons, he has developed. He's gone from being a little bit more reserved, maybe as a centre back, to being more exuberant, being more exploratory and adventurous. But also, he has, of course, played only really towards centre back this, as you mentioned, this season. Last season, he played a lot, in midfield and operated in midfield and has done. A question that Arsenal fans will have is that, do you kind of see this as a sign that Arteta's making because they believe the midfielder that they want is probably not there in this window? So they've brought in a guy that can play, predominantly at that left centre back, which is where Arsenal need depth, but also in a worst case scenario that Partey, El Neni are both unavailable, Kiwior could potentially come in and deputise in that role.
Yeah, I think so. But I think secondly as well, when Zinchenko doesn't play for Arsenal, Arsenal sometimes look like a different team. Where I think I was thinking about it when the news broke through that Zinchenko's had injury issues as well. Whereas Zinchenko is someone who can play about 3 different positions. I mean, his footballing IQ is off the charts, which is not something Kiwior can match. But he's 22. And I think this might just be my gut feeling that maybe in the future, what Arteta wants is someone who could maybe sort of deputize for Zinchenko as well. Because I think physically, Kiwior is much more robust than Zinchenko. That's not even a question. I think his footballing IQ is nowhere close to what Zinchenko's is, because Zinchenko's, as I said, it's off the charts. So I think he can be someone of the Zinchenko mold, at least if not now, then maybe in the future as well, because he's, I don't think he's Gabriel-like, because in terms of the way he plays. I think, we spoke about Tomiyasu when he joined from Bologna. The reason why I was fascinated by that move was because of Tomiyasu's versatility.
Yeah.
And I think for this move as well, versatility is a sort of key factor that makes me really excited, apart from the fact that he's technically proficient and he's really good physically. I think because we know the stat that Arsenal haven't won without Thomas Partey this season. I don't think Kiwior is a sort of a Thomas Partey sort of player.
No.
But yeah, he's someone who Arsenal could probably use in a sort of a Zinchenko role, maybe going into the future as well. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. But as of now, he's probably a left centre back
in his history.
Yeah, he's played a left wing back, in fact, not just left back. Left
this season for in a 4-0 defeat to Lazio. It wasn't a team success, but it showed his versatility, I suppose, to be able to play that position. But yeah, he's played there. I think against Sampdoria, he's played there. I think he's played in I'm looking down the list now. The Polish youth team, he's played at left back. When he was playing for Žilina in Slovakia, I believe it was. He's played there as well. So really interesting history he's got, and such a versatile player.
The thing at Spezia has always been that he's played in those positions when it's an hour of need, and not when the manager wants to try something different. I mean, it's Spezia after all. They can't try anything different. They've not got the resources or the playing style to bring in another player into the same system and hope that he plays at the same level as the one he's replacing. So I think it's been more of a rescue act of sorts, and which again shows the sort of player he is. That he's been sort of that rescue act, and he's shown that he can play in those positions. A bit like Tomiyasu as well.
Yeah, he's kind of a left-sided Tomiyasu in a sense. I suppose he could be that for Arsenal. And Arteta's been, not afraid to use Tomiyasu in big games in that left-back role. We saw it against Liverpool, of course, this season. And maybe he wants more depth in to give him more options and give him more security, especially with what's going on this season. We're going to have a look at how he compares to some of the players. Although we've said, comparatively, stylistically, he's not going to match up like for like. Of course, being a left-sided centre-back at the moment this season, it makes sense to look at him with Gabriel Magalhaes. Then also looking at Evan Ndika, who's been the other left-sided centre-back that Arsenal have been linked to. And then I was thinking, well, what other left-sided centre-back can I look at? Well, let's look at one of the best examples of a left-sided centre-back in Serie A, and Bastoni, of course, is probably the best one to look at in that sense, especially in a similar kind of age bracket. So the first thing I think you notice from these heat maps is just kind of how much ground he covers on the field. He's very, despite the fact, obviously, we've mentioned that he's tall, and on the turn, he's not that quick. What he does is that he's clearly got the coverage of a large area. And if you play a left centre-back role at Arsenal, you need to do that, because Zinchenko, playing in that left-back position, loves to go, not wandering, but he loves to kind of be more involved in the attack, become the extra midfielder. So I think positionally, that's what Arteta clearly must like about him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as I said, the context for Spezia playing is really different from, I think, a lot of the other players. Because if you look at Spezia play, a lot of times you see when Spezia are off the ball, the opposition has the ball, especially when they are in a build-up phase, when they say their centre-backs have the ball. Spezia have the tendency to make sure that one of their centre-backs push up, which Kiwior is someone who's shown that he can do that regularly. I mean, he's the one who does that quite often, more than the other centre-backs. So I think that's probably why those heat maps are much more prominent than the others. I think, as you said, he has that weakness of being turned sometimes. But I think Arsenal, I mean, specifically managers of Arteta and the Pep Guardiola, they're the sort of managers who make sure that those weaknesses stay hidden purely on the basis of the system that they put in place. So I think Kiwior will definitely benefit from them. And I think Bastoni himself benefits from that a lot.
Let's have a look at defensively then. He comes out very well comparatively. Only Bastoni is better than him in terms of ever so slightly beating him on success rate for defensive duels. Only 0.3% lower. He comes out 65.4% in terms of that. But he gets involved in the most defensive duels out of everyone on this list, 7.6 compared to Gabriel's 4. Now, I think that there's probably some context, because Spezia, of course, spend a lot of time under attack compared to, say, Arsenal. So that's why you probably see contextually those duels. Moving forward, if we have a quick look at aerial duels, you said, of course, Cos, earlier on, that he is good in the air. I was reading a report earlier on him that suggested he could be braver when it comes to some aerial duels, and he could try and look to win some instead of being a little bit more composed. But I mean, from what you said, you seem to feel very comfortable with what he's like in the air.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that sort of come across when it comes to the wider centre backs, I mean, guys like the ones we're talking about here, is that when they see the opposition trying to switch play towards their side, that's when they sort of don't know what to do in the very next second, because do they need to commit to the ball, or should they stand their ground and let the ball reach the receiver's feet, and then they should get the ball off them in the 1v1s. I think that's where I've sometimes seen Kiwior struggle. I mean, as I said, Spezia are not the most organized team in the world. And the wing backs they have, I mean, they signed one quite recently who's for some reason called Joao Moutinho himself. I mean, as I said, Spezia are not the most organized team, but I can see why he's not right at the top for aerial duels. I think, as I said, he can be turned easily. I think that's where that weakness comes in as well.
Yeah, he's probably a bit Probably he knows that, you'll know that as a player that's kind of a weakness. And so he knows if he goes in for an aerial duel, he goes in for a duel in any sense, if he is beaten, he's going to leave a lot of space in behind. So he probably is more reserved in that sense. So that does make a lot of sense. Interceptions comes out very well. The highest on this list, 6.48 per 90, which is really strong. And losses and recoveries, he comes out really well as well. The lowest number of losses per 90, 5.36 compared to Gabriel's 6.54. and Dika's 7.32 and Bastoni's 7.08, and he comes out with the highest in terms of recoveries as well, 11.83 per 90, which is really good. That element of being secure in his passing, which we'll come on to in a second, and obviously where he's making decision making, where he's playing, whether it's a clearance, whether it's a header on deep, he's making sure to try and recover possession as much as he can. So let's talk about his passing. It comes out 90% accuracy, passes into the final third. He is progressive. 3.17 is short, the lowest on this list, but we've seen plenty of times where he's passed a long ball in behind and it's done well. But is there context with the team that he's currently at as to maybe why we're seeing the frequency of these balls into the final third not as high as Gabriel, Bastoni, and Dika's?
Yeah, I think, as I said, he's someone who's, specifically, I think Spezia are the sort of side who are not great receivers. In the midfield and in the final third. They use longer balls more often, but they don't really have the receivers for long balls. The two strikers that they have, they're more like runners. They're not the sort of strikers who receive the ball at their head or on the chest. They're more of those strikers who like to receive the ball at their feet and run with it. And he scored 9 goals as well. So I think the good part, I think the most important part about Kiwior's playing style is the long balls, which every time you look at him technically, it shows that he's got a hammer of a left foot as well, which helps him in the free kicks. He takes some free kicks as well. He's taken them here and there. Not those free kicks, not those longer free kicks, those direct free kicks. And he's got a hammer of a left foot, and those free kicks and those long balls really show that. And he's really good at switching the ball off to the other side because, as I said, Spezia like to go direct more often. So it's always more helpful to switch the ball out wide instead of playing it up front, which doesn't always help Spezia because they've not got those proper target man strikers. They've got more of those runners. So I think that's where those stats sort of bring more context.
Indeed. Let's have a quick look at kind of how he's on the ball. Dribbles, he does more than both Gabriel and Dika per 90, 0.49 dribbles per 90, and is confident enough to have 80% success rate in those dribbles. Offensively as well, looking at kind of where his shots are on the field as well. Even though we say aerially, he's not as at the most opportunities, though he's got, I think the most in terms of looking at in the box there, that graphic behind Gabriel. And Dika's not getting too many on target, neither's Bastoni. But if he says good kind of with those free kicks and corners, I'm not expecting him to start taking corners anytime soon because he's your centre back. But do you think he is going to be a threat in that area?
Yeah, I think I definitely think so. We've got to remember the fact that he essentially is going to replace Pablo Mari there, which that's not even a comparison because I think he's way better than someone like Pablo Mari. But I think, as I said, he's got a hammer of a left foot, and if given the chance, he can definitely take a shot. He's someone like I used to see a lot of Marcos Rojo back in the days when he was at United. Probably not like that, but he's got a shot.
You're going to start scaring people naming players like that.
He's not like him, but yeah, he can definitely take those shots.
Yeah, threat in the box for sure. Let's have a quick look at some of the things I noticed when I was watching, and I think the key one is obviously that long passing behind. He does have that in his locker. This is an example in the World Cup playing for Poland, of which I believe he did start every game for Poland on the left. So was Glick playing alongside him? I assume in most of those games. I think he got in ahead
50-year-old.
50-year-old Kamil Glick, yes. So if you need someone to bail you out on the turn, it's probably not going to be him, to be fair. But yeah, fantastic ball in behind his Berezinski on the left-hand side. Again, playing for Spezia against Roma. Moving this time into midfield, you see positionally, he doesn't mind pushing forward a little bit. And again, another example here where he's pushed into that centre circle box to play the ball out into the wide areas as well. It seems he's pretty confident when on the ball. I mean, obviously in Serie A compared to the Premier League, he's going to be given more time on the ball, and he's obviously going to have to react to that speed of an expectation that comes with moving to the Premier League. But, I think that part of his game is something that Arteta is going to appreciate when the ball goes out to Martinelli or out to Saka. And all of a sudden, when Arsenal have got players like Xhaka and Ødegaard running forwards and creating space through the middle and creating a bit of chaos with runs and taking players out of different spaces, seeing defenders who can launch the ball into those dangerous positions suddenly adds a little bit of a different dimension to a team that they don't necessarily have. And if you watch Arsenal this season, Saliba, ironically, when he was at Marseille, would play long ball after long ball after long ball, really, and that has dropped down in now I think about it while talking through it somewhat since moving to Arsenal. You don't tend to see Saliba playing those long balls. You see Ben White do it at right back quite a bit, but you don't see Saliba do it as much. So do you think that this thing that I notice in his game, which seems to be quite a strength of his, actually could get toned down a bit at Arsenal?
I mean, I think it depends on the context. I mean, I've probably used the word context too many times, but it is what it is, probably. I think Arsenal are heading into the sort of season where they are 9-10 points clear at the top. There might be games when they'll have to stay really structured. I mean, not to say they're parking the bus or something like that. They'll have to be really structured in their own half or in their own shape. So I think that's where Kiwior's ability to play those long passes will come really handy, because Spezia have two really good wide players in Emmanuel Gyasi and Daniele Verde, who are really quick and they're really good to make those runs in behind. And we know the way Spezia play, as I mentioned, they like to break from the wide areas, and Kiwior is someone who supplies his wide passes really well, which is why I think probably Bastoni is the closest comparison when it comes to his on-the-ball ability. I mean, obviously Bastoni is more progressive while carrying the ball. Kiwior is probably not. I mean, he can turn out to be so, but as of now, he's probably not because he plays at Spezia and for Poland of all national teams. But yeah, I think that can definitely come in handy, especially heading into the sort of phase that Arsenal will play in. I mean, they've got City to play twice. They've got United to play this weekend. So, I mean, and I think they're yet to play Newcastle as well. So I think those are the sort of games where Arsenal are more structured in their own shape, and they would have to exploit those spaces and behind. And since that's a very, a crucial part of the season, and Arsenal are top of the league, they want to win the league. They'll have to make sure that they're very structured in their approach as well, make sure they don't leave any spaces in their midfield. So I think that's definitely going to come in handy.
Lovely stuff. Moving into then the verdicts, the price tag is expected to go in excess of 20 million euros. I think close to 20 million pounds, which probably in today's money is around 23, 24 million euros. I think probably around that, structurally, with add-ons, of course, included into this. Apparently, Dortmund had a 22 million euro bid rejected recently by Spezia, so you can imagine it might be slightly more than that. Is he worth the money for what Arsenal are looking to bring in?
I think when Serie A clubs were looking at him, and I think West Ham had a bid rejected for him as well about some months ago, but yes. I think the bid they offered was somewhere in the region of 12 million or something, which I thought at that point was enough.
Style bid, 12 million pounds.
Yeah, pretty much. Which I thought at that point was enough, because that's when he hadn't started playing centre back full time. I think at this point, if that fee is at 25, it might be, say, £3 or £4 expensive, but a lot of fans said the same thing for Ben White when he joined. I mean, I didn't, because I used to be a massive fan of Ben White, and I believe that if Ben White played in the Bundesliga, he would have left for something like 60 million or something. But just because he played at Brighton and not RB Leipzig or Borussia Mönchengladbach, that's why he's gone for 50 million or something. But I think it just depends on how he's used, and when it comes to fans asking is he worth the money or not, it probably depends on how he ends up doing in that approach, in that Arsenal Arteta system, because I think he's very well suited to it, and he's someone who deserved to play in a system like that. I mean, you've probably heard about my abhorrence for Spezia system and their approach.
You've
already.
made a slight hint to it this show, just a slight hint to that hatred of Spezia.
To be fair, Spezia are probably I mean, the way their stadium is they've got probably the most fashionable stadium I've seen in the top 5 European
I need
leagues.
to have a look
That's
at that.
probably the best part about them. But I think Kiwior is a perfect fit for the way Arsenal play. Is he worth the money? All depends on how he does. But as of now, he's probably like, as I said, 4 or 5 million expensive. But we'll see how that goes down.
I'm just looking at pictures of Spezia Stadium now, and it is picturesque, would be the word.
And the camera angles they use for Spezia's games are downright funny. I mean, they're way too zoomed in.
So you don't get to see any of the mountains and like everything in the background.
No, not at all.
You get no appreciation. Sad. It is sad because
it's a place I really want to go to and watch Spezia games. Hopefully, with Kiwior not playing.
Do you know where in Italy?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Look, whilst we're answering questions, do you have a few more minutes to answer some questions from the chat box? Is that all right?
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely stuff. Let's jump.
I know for a fact that Zaniolo was born in Spezia.
Well, that tells us nothing about where it is.
I mean, that's general knowledge for you.
Spezia is, where is it? Arena Stadio. Yes. It's not telling me where it is. It's in Liguria in Italy, wherever that is. I'm looking now. Where is it? I'm really, me. I used to be a geography teacher, so this is where I get all excited. Northern part of Spain, northern part of Italy. Sorry, kind of in the curve just to the east of Monaco and Nice. It's kind of that curve bay part near Genoa is where Spezia is. So. That's where it is. So there's some information that geographically can excite people. Let's go to questions then from the chat box and get your thoughts, because I know you're already getting bored of me getting excited about geography. Let's go.
I love geography.
I did a degree in it, so I must like it. Let's go to. I love this question that came in earlier from Dan saying, "Can anyone name the last 3 Polish players to play for Arsenal?" I did put the answer in the chat. Cos, can you name all 3 Polish players that played for Arsenal? 2 should be.
I know at least one. One's Wojciech Szczesny.
Yes, the other is also a goalkeeper.
Who I love nowadays. Second one. Can I get a hint?
He plays for West Ham. Goalkeeper.
Lucas Fabianski.
Yes. And the last
Who's the third one? I mean, a hint.
The last one is a midfielder, and he dropped down to play in the Championship by a team managed by Wayne Rooney.
Christian Bielik.
Yes, Christian Bielik played.
I was a big fan of him like 6 years ago or something.
Yeah, a lot of fans were. A lot of fans were big fans of him. He went for about 10 million quid to Derby, which has never been paid back because, as everyone knows, Derby are in horrific financial straits at the moment. I think
there was this time when I think that's when Bielik had actually joined Arsenal. I was just starting off my writing stuff. That's when he was one of the first players I'd written about. I don't even know why, but
that you joined from.
Probably.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Probably it was Legion Warsaw. Yes, I just checked. Daniel says Kiwior and Lokonga must know each other due to being at Anderlecht together. Was Kiwior at Anderlecht as well?
I don't think so.
No, he wasn't. Just checking on my list here. Dan definitely didn't play for Anderlecht. Gooner Jake says, hey, Cos, lovely breakdown. Do you think he has the mentality to adapt and cope with the pace of the Premier League? And also, does he have pace?
I mean, he has the pace. As I said, on the ground, he's quite quick. When it comes to adapting and coping with the pace of the Premier League, if you look at him, he never smiles. And he's got those great tattoos on his arms as well. So, I mean, players like those
I love
really
this
work
picture
out well
that I used earlier. This is a great photo. There's the
he looks quite
disapproval.
slender in that.
Put the ball over there. That's great. I had to use that picture. Yeah, sorry. Continue.
I think he's. I mean, based purely of the way he defends, he likes to make those last-ditch tackles, making sure that he makes those recoveries off the ball when a quicker attacker is moving past him. He's making those sliding tackles, winning the ball last-ditch. I think that probably tells me either one of those two things. I mean, you get where I'm pointing to. That it's just that good old Maldini question where, I mean, Maldini never made tackles. Was that because of his positioning, or was that because he was too quick? I mean,
didn't he say
that's the duality.
If I had to make a tackle, it's because I made a mistake. That was his famous saying.
But I think in his case, Kiwior's case, as I said, if he's 1v1 and he's being turned, and he's not protected by a structure behind him, or I mean, not protected by his fellow centre backs and the other players around him. There can be problems there, but on the ground he's quite quick. I mean, and I think coping with the pace of the Premier League uh, is something, if given enough time, a lot of people, I mean, a lot of players do cope up with it. I mean, there's been cases where players haven't, but a lot of it is down to the fact that they haven't been given time to adapt to it. So I think, and he's 22, by the way, he's not someone who's, and then Pablo Mari came in, he was like, what, 26, 27. I mean, I don't know why I'm harking back to Pablo Mari all the time. Probably because he plays in Serie A.
He does. He's not been bad, prior to obviously.
Yeah, he's been pretty good actually.
He's been good. Yeah, he has been good for Monza. And of course,
and
if
he's
they stay
playing
up,
for a fashionable club as well. So.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Monza, lovely stuff. I have to correct what we said earlier on. He did actually play for Anderlecht at youth level.
Did he? I don't know.
Yeah, he did. He was there for 2 years between 2016 and 2018 before he then moved to.
Was Lokonga there at that point?
I don't know.
I mean, he's the product of that academy. It should be.
Yeah, he must have been, surely, if he was there between 2016 and 18. Lokonga has been at Anderlecht. Yeah, he was. He was there at that time. So they would know each other. I'm sure they would have crossed paths at some stage. I hope his career is...
Maybe he's talked to him already.
Maybe he has. Maybe that was one of the things that he spoke to. Let's go to scroll up a little bit more. There's a lot of people asking things that we've already kind of discussed about, like, can he play DM? Is he good on the ball? Go back and rewind, guys, because it is worth listening to the start of the show. He certainly can. Ginger Gooner says, could you see us playing Zinchenko as a 6? If heaven forbid Partey ever picked up an injury and slotted Kiwior into left back. Do you think that's maybe a scenario that Arsenal might use in the future?
I don't think so, because I think playing at left back is not something which comes naturally to him. I mean, playing at wing back doesn't come naturally to him either, but he did that. They lost 4-0. I mean, he was probably not at fault for any one of those goals, but he's not someone who's, I mean, playing at wing back at Spezia doesn't require you to do as much work as an Arsenal left back would have to. So I think that's where, again, the contexts are different. So I don't think he's someone who can bomb up and down the pitch. If he's asked to cover a specific position and stay in that role, I think that's where he'll succeed more. So I don't think playing him at left back makes sense unless you want him to. In possession, Arsenal are playing a back three. And a bit like what Inter do with Bastonium, they've done that for years now. And Kiwior drops in as that left-sided centre-back in possession. As soon as they advance, he moves wide, something like that.
Stephen says, at what stage is the transfer at? I assume he's just in talks. No, this is pretty much done, Stephen. There is an expectation that a medical will take place this weekend, and he could even be in attendance for the Man United game. He won't be involved, but he could be in attendance at the Emirates for that game on Sunday. You're a Man United fan, right, Cos? You must be pretty nervous ahead of the weekend. How are you feeling ahead of Sunday?
I just want a positive performance. I mean, honestly, that's what I wanted in the City game as well. And the fact that United won was pretty nice, although I still think that goal was offside. But who cares now anyway? But I just want a positive performance. That's it.
You can't be moaning.
Yeah.
Peony says, how do we pronounce his name? I'm as far as I'm aware, it's Kiwior. Obviously, in Polish, you pronounce your W's as V's. So yeah, Kiwior is what I've reliably informed is how we pronounce his name. Oda Relay says, when is the Trossard tactical breakdown coming in? Hopefully tomorrow. I had to kind of shelve that till tomorrow because we needed to know more about Kiwior because a lot of us know a lot about Trossard. So I've shelved that for tomorrow. We're going to round things off there. Oh, actually, what we'll do to finish it off, Elliot, is asking the question to you, Cos. What would you give this out of 10 as a signing, contextually, of everything involved?
I would say probably 7. I mean, as a Kiwior fan, as a member of the Jakub Kiwior fan club, which is quite.
I meet every Thursday and Friday, every other week, by the way. Just letting you know, if you want to join.
And watch Spezia games at home, which is a good watch. I'll probably give it a 7, but from Kiwior's perspective, it's probably an 11 out of 10.
Yeah, I bet it is. He's probably buzzing. To be fair, as we mentioned, there are a lot of very decent sides in for him. Borussia Dortmund had a bid rejected. Last year, West Ham had a bid rejected as well. So he has been tracked and appreciated by plenty of very good sides who know their talent. So hopefully he can provide us with something interesting between now and, of course, going forwards. Cos, thank you so much for your time, mate. Really appreciate it, as always. Fantastic knowledge and insight about Serie A. That's why I get you on. Tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
I'm on Twitter at cos_Pandey17. There's loads of stuff going on at GIFN, and I freelance a lot, so there's loads of stuff coming there. And do check out my tweets about Kiwior himself.
Yeah,
Been propping him up for the last 2-3 hours or something.
exactly. That's why we got him on. He's a big fan. Big fan. As I said, if you would like to join the Kiwior fan club, they meet every Thursday and Friday at
The memberships are closed, though.
Oh, they closed. Oh, got it. Maybe I have to get on the
Closed them today.
Waiting list. Closed them today. Too much interest. Too much. It's just that the small room where they all meet just got packed out far too quickly. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Really appreciate your time. Do drop a like on the video, of course. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll be back tomorrow morning to react to more of your questions and thoughts on Kiwior's potential signing in the 8 a.m. show. Fingers crossed we'll have a Leandro Trossard breakdown for you tomorrow. I actually had a really good conversation today with Thomas Buffel, who used to play with him at Genk, about Trossard. So hopefully that'll be coming out as an article on Football London tomorrow as well. So look out for that. Have a fantastic Friday evening. Enjoy it. Relax, chill, or go crazy, whatever you want to do. It's been a great time for Arsenal. You deserve it. We will see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.